What's that? Oh, you like my shirt? Oh, it's just my merch. A doink! Fishing in Animal Crossing is not only an extremely efficient way to make money to chip away at your crippling debt to Mr. Nook and fulfill your Pokemon-esque gotta-catch-em-all addiction, the fish are also pretty dang cute. And if you choose, you can even hold on to them to build a private mega aquarium of sorts. But with the fish you catch ranging anywhere from something you can find at your local pond to ancient anomalies, I wanted to know how many of the Animal Crossing New Horizons fish I could legally obtain in real life. And yes, we're going to be exclusively looking at the New Horizons fish, and the other critters they classify as fish. So any fish from previous games that were discontinued can sleep safely tonight, knowing that I'm not out there hunting them down. On a serious note though, one thing I want to make clear right off the bat is that in this fictional scenario where I'm attempting to become a fish owner to all these buttes, I'm the best fictional fish owner in the world. These fictional fish couldn't get a better life than with me. I fictionally rented out a huge building where I keep the best tanks, the water has the most immaculate fictional pH balance you can imagine, and species that adore each other will be housed together, and species that even give another species so much as a side eye will be separated. Fictionally. Fictionally, I am a perfect fish owner and they shall want for nothing. In the real world, I am not advocating for owning any of these fish. I'm not trying to. I'm not saying others should. I'm simply a gal who wants the best for fish, even if they gross me out a little. I don't like how you can see their insides through their gills if you're at the right angle. It's icky to me. But despite that, I want them to live happy lives, both fictionally and non-fictionally. So I'm not endorsing owning any of them, especially without doing your own research, because there's a lot of misinformation on the proper care for even the most common fish that are kept as pets. So I'm just saying, me saying in this video that I could legally obtain X, Y, or Z fish does not mean that in reality I think you or I should. But my fictional fish are happy. We good? Alright, so on to potentially contentious point number 2. In this hypothetical scenario, I am living in California, as I actually do, and abiding by the corresponding laws. Now this might make some people upset because they think I should be looking at the legality of owning these fish in every state, and can I just see you over here for a sec? Yeah, real quick. Alright, look friend, if you understood the sheer number of laws and regulations and acts and documents that I had to cross-reference while researching this video, I emailed people, I called people. Do you know what that does to me? I can't do every state. Thank you. You can pick up now. Also, if we're looking at all the fish I can have simultaneously, going to other states doesn't make sense because what's legal in one state might be illegal in another, but there might be a fish that's legal in that state that's illegal in the next, so the entire list would contradict itself. And in this thought experiment, I'm not moving. This is how many Animal Crossing fish could I legally obtain in real life. I don't want multiple private aquariums across the country. I want to be in California. So I needed to do it this way, and if you want to know if you can own a fish in your state or country, you're gonna have to do the research yourself. Speaking of looking at this in a realistic fashion, my reasoning for obtaining these fish can only be for private collection. I'm not gonna start working on a fishing boat. I'm not gonna become the owner of a functioning public aquarium. I am not going to breed them to sell. There are no loopholes. I am merely obtaining them and keeping them for personal lookage. Sounds weird. Now the last thing I want to preface is that this video would have been absolutely atrocious to make if it wasn't for Encyclopedia on Tumblr, who has made blog entries on every single fish in Animal Crossing, identifying them down to their exact species. She's actually a marine biologist, and the number of facts I learned about all these fish from her posts was staggering, so I really recommend checking out her blog if you want to learn some fun facts about these species. It'll be linked below. And due to her expertise as a marine biologist and the clear amount of work that went into her research of these fish, I will be deferring to the specific species that she classified each fish as, with just a little exception. There are some species that she rightfully points out look much closer to a different species or even group than what it's labeled as. For example, this is what Animal Crossing calls a sea butterfly, but in reality it's modeled after a sea angel, which is further backed up by Blather's description in New Leaf referring to its hunting habits in buckle cones, which is what sea angels have. In fact, sea angels eat sea butterflies. But the plot thickens, because in New Horizons, Blather's description lists the sea butterfly's scientific name, and that's correctly attributed to the sea butterfly. Another example is the killifish, which Encyclopedia says looks much more like a Japanese rice fish, which I don't disagree with. But Blather's description says that his own favorite killifish species are the mangrove, which are a species of killifish. So I do believe they meant for the fish to be a killifish. There might have just been a communication error with the ones in charge of designing it. So what do we do? Do I go with the name or the illustration? Well, since both the names and the descriptions match up, and they obviously had to illustrate the fish after deciding which fish they wanted them to be, meaning that's the likeliest place where the mistake happened, I'm gonna go with the type of fish that Animal Crossing says and then hone in on the closest matching species from there. But if Encyclopedia species already fits under the fish type, great, we're going with that. Okay, we are ready to look at the fish. Since we're trying to determine whether or not I can legally obtain them, let's start with the legally part of that. Because right off the bat, we can eliminate a portion of these fish through different laws and acts that prevent possession of them. We'll start with CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, which is a global agreement among governments to regulate or ban international trade in species under threat. Now, we actually aren't going to be worrying about the species on the CITES list too much, mostly because a lot of them cross over with other lists I'm about to mention, but also because this is only regarding international trade, so we can avoid that by not venturing outside of the US when acquiring these fish. So there might be like one time where I bring CITES up, but it's not going to affect things too much, all things considered. Then on a national level, we have the Endangered Species Act, the ESA, which prohibits any taking of, importation, exportation, and interstate and foreign commerce of any species that is under the threatened status regarding extinction. The ICU and Red List reflects the current status of different species, and through this I found that the Chinese softshell turtle, Atlantic sturgeon, Korean seahorse, humphead wrasse, northern red snapper, Atlantic blue marlin, ocean sunfish, scalloped hammerhead, great white shark, whale shark, and West Indian Ocean coelacanth all fell under a threatened status, and therefore I could not legally obtain any of them. Again, if you're wondering why these specific species were chosen, I urge you to look at the entries on Encyclopedia's blog where she goes into great detail about each one. But the law doesn't stop there, because we also have the Lacey Act, which lists species that are considered federally injurious and thus may not be imported, transported, or possessed in captivity without a permit. And like the permits required for ESA listed animals and California restricted animals, these are not given to lay people such as ourselves. These permits to import or keep live fish are generally granted for scientific, educational, or research purposes, like for aquariums or labs. You can't just be like, I want one. This list includes all species of salmonidity due to risk of carrying harmful pathogens, so that rules out the cherry salmon, chum salmon, Chinook salmon, stringfish, white spotted char, and California golden trout. And then elsewhere on the list we can find the Crucian carp, northern snakehead, and Chinese mitten crab, so we can cross all of these species off the list. And now we get to the state level, because the Lacey Act is further supported by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, or the CDFW, who have their own additional rules and regulations. We have the CDFW Invasive Species Program and California Code of Regulations Title 14, Section 671 regarding the importation, transportation, and possession of live restricted animals, which prohibits the importation, transportation, and possession of listed animals without a permit that, once again, we would not be granted. This prohibits the common snapping turtle, yellow perch, Nile tilapia, Asian arowana, and all species of pikes, piranhas, and gars. I have great news. That brings us to the end of the legally section. Kind of. I'll explain more after this quick commercial break. Hey yo, I'm Big Frankie from Big Frankie's Playhouse Emporium, and today I'm talking about Goombanna's merch. Goombanna hired me, Big Frankie, to tell y'all a little bit about these great deals. We got everything. We got shirts, we got hats, we got more shirts, we got shirts coming out of our ears. Any merch you could ever want. You want mugs? We got them. You want stickers? We got them. We got it all here. So get your tail over to Goombanna's merch shop where you'll get the greatest deals for your scrap. Even my nephew Antonio wears these things. They're great. So get over to the merch shop. Links in the descriptions. Tell him Big Frankie sent you from Big Frankie's Playhouse Emporium. Get over here. Okay, so you would think that after crossing off all of the fish from the federal and state level restricted lists, the remaining fish would all clearly be perfectly legal to own, right? Not necessarily. It's very complicated. And that's not me being a poos. I wrote to the director of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife and asked them why, despite cross-referencing all of those lists, I was still finding sources that disputed the legality of owning fish that weren't on any of the lists. And the very first thing they said was that it largely depends on the species and intended use and is fairly complex. So I feel a little justified in saying that these laws can be a bit vague. They couldn't give me too many specifics without me actually filing importation permit requests for all the species, which I wasn't looking to do. But they did inform me that it's illegal to transport and hold captive any live fin fish caught from a water of the state. So that rules out me obtaining any fish via fishing. Fair game. They also said the aquarium trade is not regulated by the CDFW because those animals are intended to remain in captivity. However, they can also harbor pathogens that are illegal to import, so there is a role for CDFW there on importation. I assume they're talking about the pathogens tied to the species of salmonidity list in the Lacey Act that we covered earlier, but I guess I don't know for sure because they didn't get more specific than that. And then, in by far the most ominous sentence of the email, they said, I would also caution that there are many species in the underground aquarium trade already here in the US that are illegal to possess in California and many other parts of the US. So be sure to check the restricted species list in Lacey Act carefully and only obtain aquarium fish from reputable sources. The underground aquarium trade. And here I thought the FBI would be investigating me because of my Witch Smash Bros have committed a crime research. Little did I know the shady underbelly of the internet that this video might require me to delve into. I do it for y'all. But from everything I researched and from the info that I gleaned from the CDFW's director, I believe that as long as I am buying the remaining species of fish that weren't on any of those lists from a breeder or fish distributor within the US, I'm okay. I kind of have no choice but to assume that the companies acquired their fish legally, and if they didn't, I'm not sure that the onus would be on me as the buyer anyway. So all that being said, I made sure that every company that I list from here on out is located in the US. So then it just came down to if I could find a seller online. And I did decide to count it if they had the species listed on their website, even if it was out of stock, because I have no idea when they went out of stock or when they'll be back. I mean, it could be by the time you're watching this video, I don't know. Or it could be that you can only get them during certain seasons or times of the year, or maybe they have to special order them, but either way, I think it's fair to consider that overall obtainable. So let's start with the ones I was able to find. And before I launch into this list, let me state again, for the record, that my mention of these sellers is not a personal endorsement of them in any way, and I am not endorsing owning any of these fish in general. I'm just neutrally doing my job of finding any place that could hypothetically sell me these fish. And this was not necessarily an easy task, by the way. A lot of fish distributors don't show their stock online or just don't have websites at all. Like, a lot of them just didn't have websites. So I had to just work with what I could find. Luckily, I was first able to find a large group of them on Smartfish Aquarium's website. There were a few that just barely skirted around the rules that I found interesting. For example, both the Lacey Act and the California Restricted Species List had a ton of species of carp, but the common carp, which is the species that the Animal Crossing carp is most like, wasn't on any of them. And Smartfish Aquarium happened to offer them. Likewise, while almost all species of crayfish, or crawfish depending on where you are, aren't allowed, the two exceptions are the Procambarus chlorkii, the red swamp crayfish, and the Orchonectus virilis, the virile crayfish. And the Animal Crossing crayfish is designed after the red swamp crayfish. Wonder why they didn't go with the other. Cowards. Let's talk about the largemouth bass for a second, because I have a bone to pick. I came across this page on the CDFW's website where someone asks, can I keep a largemouth bass as a pet in California? And they respond, no! Fish and Game Code Section 2118E prohibits possession of several types of fish in California, including largemouth bass. So let's go over to California Fish and Game Code Section 2118E. Okay, so this column on the left is showing the family of fish, and then the column on the right is showing the exact species that are restricted. We can see a bit further down on the left, gars, on the right, all species. So all species of the Lepisostiidae family are restricted. Fine. But going back to the Serenity family, that means that only white perches are restricted. I mean, I think I'm reading that correctly. That's how every other restricted species list is formatted. In addition, at the top of the code, it says that this applies to any wild animal, which means that if it's bred in captivity, it doesn't apply. Which means that saying that in general you can't have a pet largemouth bass is at the very least misleading and at worst just incorrect. CDFW, this is what makes it so confusing. And back to Smartfish Aquarium, who offer largemouth bass, they're actually on the official approved aquaculturist list of the CDFW. So I will be taking one largemouth bass, please. Hypothetically. Okay, that was a long sidetrack, so I'm gonna make up some time and just say that I also found koi, bluegills, freshwater angelfish, and all three types of goldfish on there as well. I found some of the more common fish you might see in an aquarium at Petco, like the guppy, the neon tetra, clownfish, and perhaps more titillating, the saddled biger. And then these are the other ones I was able to find from various places around the internet, again, all located in the US. The rosy bitterling, which Encyclopedia said could also potentially be the Japanese rosy bitterling, but since Blather says they're common in the original Animal Crossing, I'll go ahead on the much more common rosy bitterling. The rose-tailed betta, the pale chub, with the males most often being used in aquariums due to their more vibrant coloring. The killifish that we talked about in the beginning, which if I had to pick a specific species of killifish, I think would be the golden wonder killifish. If it helps put your mind at ease, Japanese ricefish or medaka are available for purchase too. The Japanese tree frog, which in turn can check tadpole off the list. You baby frog, etc. The Gara rufa, also known as the nibblefish, which cannot be used in California as a spa or pedicure treatment, but can be pets. The ornate rainbow fish, good book, good book. The Dorado, the Arapaima gigas, which genuinely surprised me considering these dudes regularly get up to 6.5 feet long, potentially reaching 15 feet. And these bad boys are on the site's list, but since we're ordering from within the country, the point is moot. We've got the regal blue tang, the oriental butterfly fish, and the zebra turkey fish, which Encyclopedia thinks is actually the Luna lionfish. But again, since the zebra turkey fish is already a specific species and the Luna lionfish is a completely different fish, I've got to go with the zebra turkey fish. I also found the long spine giant porcupine fish, surprisingly to me both the Kadako moray eel and the ribbon eel, the giant trevally, and common remora. That's a lot of fish! However, there were many others I couldn't find for one reason or another. I did notice a bit of a trend that the more common it was for a type of fish to be eaten, the less likely it was that they were bred for hobbyists and sold as pets. The species searches that only resulted in food were the wakasagi, ayu sweetfish, Japanese anchovy, Japanese horse mackerel, Japanese sea bass, southern bluefin tuna, Alaskan plaice, and olive flounder. Some were unavailable because they live in extreme deep sea environments. These species included football fish, giant oarfish, and barrel eye, which this is wild, by the way. I feel like there was some 90s cartoon character that turned into a submarine or something that looked like this. What am I thinking of? I can't remember, but it's got big, humongous entertainment games energy. Point is, these fish are not meant for the surface. Of those three, only the giant oarfish has ever been alive in an aquarium, and it was like once, and then it died the same day, which is very sad, but that's how unobtainable to humans they are. The rest of the list I just couldn't find for any number of reasons. Maybe they're too niche for sellers to bother, or maybe they're just really not suited for any type of aquarium lifestyle. Regardless of the reason, I couldn't find any Japanese dace, Japanese striped loaches, amur catfish, sea butterflies, or sea angels, which are actually sea slugs, by the way. Dark sleepers, fine patterned puffers, barred knife jaws, mahi-mahi, red stingrays, Japanese saw sharks, or big fin reef squid, though I have seen video of this species being owned. Nonetheless, I couldn't find a single seller on my journey. It was mostly squid as food, and therefore I couldn't obtain it even if I wanted to. If you're able to find a US seller of any of these species, let me know. But do make sure that you're double checking that the scientific name matches up. Like, you could find other stingrays, but not specifically this species of red stingray. So there you have it. Out of the 80 fish and other sea creatures in Animal Crossing New Horizons, I could legally obtain 31 of them in real life. You didn't need to know, but now you know. And if you want to be made aware of more things that you don't know you want to know and probably don't need to know, you gotta subscribe. Last year, I was very proud because I beat Social Blade's predictions for the number of subs I'd have by the end of the year, thanks to you all, and now Social Blade's saying I won't hit 40k until March 18th, and I'd really like to prove them wrong. So please consider subscribing if you haven't, and speaking of fish and where to find them, catch me streaming over on Twitch. Stream? I better see you over there. I'll see myself out.
Goombanna is the wonder why she didn't come to play. Gaming vids that'll make you laugh and think and put them on replay. Intelligent, kind of funny, her community's #1. Stick around and kick your feet up. Goombanna has just begun.